There were 3 shot glasses in the sink. One was hers, the pink-rimmed one she only used when she planned on getting reckless. The other 2 weren't from our house. That's the first thing I saw when I walked into the kitchen. Not her. Not her phone. Not a note. Just 3 shot glasses and her favorite cardigan balled up on the floor next to the fridge, like she'd tossed it off in a rush. It was 7:42 a.m. Saturday. She hadn't come home. Her last message was a blurry photo of some neon-lit living room with the caption, "We outside woozy face kiss mark." No response to my texts. No missed calls. Just that, and the quiet hum of a refrigerator that suddenly felt louder than everything else in my life. I didn't sleep. I stayed up all night in our bed, alone, checking her location like some desperate fool. It was bouncing between streets I didn't recognize, then vanished around 3:11 a.m. phone off, or dead, or whatever excuse she'd come up with later. And I know what people will say. She's an adult. She's allowed to have a life. Yeah? Is she also allowed to vanish into the night, ignore every call, and come back reeking of club air like I'm the roommate who just pays half the rent? Because when the front door finally opened at 9:12 a.m., that's exactly what it felt like. Not a partner. Not a husband. Just a roommate she was tired of acknowledging. She looked like she hadn't slept. Hair sticking in odd directions. One earring missing. Her makeup looked like it had been removed with a paper towel and regret. And in her hand? A crumpled fast food bag and a Vinny iced coffee. Like this was just another Sunday morning. I asked, "Where were you?" She blinked slowly. "God, Daryl, not now. I'm literally dying." That's all I got. Not, "Sorry I didn't answer." Not, "I should have texted." Just, "Not now." I followed her into the kitchen. She kicked off her heels like they offended her, cracked her neck, then turned to me with a look like I was the one who had some explaining to do. "I thought we agreed," I said, trying not to raise my voice. "You wouldn't go to those kinds of parties anymore." "We didn't agree," she muttered, pulling her hair into a bun. "You said you didn't like them. That's different. You left without even telling me." "Oh my God, are you really still on this?" she snapped, slamming her drink onto the counter. "It was one night. I went out. I had fun. I didn't commit a crime. You didn't come home," I said, my voice cracking on the last word. She rolled her eyes so hard I could practically hear them. "I slept at Maya's. We were all drunk. It wasn't safe to drive. You'd be screaming louder if I had driven." "Maya's?" I asked. "Then why did your location show you near the north side all night?" That was the moment. The moment her face shifted, just for a second, like the story in her head wasn't ready for that detail. Then she scoffed, laughed even. "Oh my God, are you tracking me now?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "This is why I don't tell you anything anymore." Like that was supposed to make me feel better. Like my concern was the problem. Like my noticing things was the betrayal. She walked out of the kitchen with her food, her drink, and not a single ounce of remorse. I stood there staring at the pink-rimmed shot glass in the sink, the one she only used when she didn't plan on remembering anything. And I realized something. She remembered exactly what she did. She just didn't care that I knew. I wish I could say that was the worst part, the cold return, the casual indifference, the way she weaponized silence like it was a skill. But no, that was just the setup. The unraveling didn't start until later that afternoon, when she finally decided to be civil and grace me with her version of the truth. She slept for most of the morning. I sat in the hallway just outside our bedroom door, knees tucked up, rereading every one of my messages from the night before, as if there was some clue I missed. I even typed out a long message apologizing for being too intense, but thankfully I didn't hit send. That's how scrambled my brain was. I was about to apologize for being worried about my wife disappearing overnight. When she finally emerged, she had the nerve to act like nothing had happened. She tossed on an oversized sweatshirt, threw her hair in a lazy braid, and plopped down on the couch with her phone. The exact spot where I'd sat the night before, numb, worried, and sleepless. She just took it back like it belonged to her. I asked, quietly, "Are we going to talk about last night?" She didn't even look up from her screen. "Why? So you can accuse me of things again?" My heart sank. I hadn't accused her of anything. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't even used the words I wanted to, the ones that burned the back of my throat when I saw that Instagram video. I didn't say cheating. I didn't say liar. I just asked where she was. And for that, I was labeled dramatic, controlling, clingy. "Can you just walk me through it?" I asked. "You left for Maya's, then what?" She sighed like I'd asked her to explain rocket science. "We drank. We danced. Then everyone went over to Blake's place." I paused. Blake. Yeah. He has a bigger apartment, she said, her voice coated in fake casualness. Maya's place got loud. Neighbors complained. Whatever. Blake from the gym? I asked, already knowing the answer. The same guy she once called obnoxiously hot. The guy she used to say was dangerous, but in a fun way. She didn't answer. Just gave me that blank stare. Were there other girls? I pushed. Another pause. Some. Not many. I sat down across from her, staring at the floor because I couldn't handle looking into her face when it had no shame left. So, you left the house in full makeup, barely said a word to me, went to a second location I didn't know about, with mostly guys, and stayed out all night without replying to a single message. Then came home smelling like vodka and strangers, and now you're acting like I'm the one overreacting? Her thumbs paused on her phone screen. Finally, she looked up. I didn't do anything wrong. That's what she said. Word for word. Not, I'm sorry I scared you. Not, I should have called. Just, I didn't do anything wrong. That sentence, it echoed. Like she believed it. Like somehow, her actions didn't need context because they were fun. Because they weren't illegal. Because I wasn't bleeding. But I was bleeding. Just not the kind she could see. I wanted to scream, but all I said was, did you stay at Blake's? She didn't answer. I asked again, and this time her eyes narrowed. I slept on the couch. Not that it's any of your business. That last part, that shattered something in me. The way she said it. Not defensive, not regretful, just dismissive, like I was an obstacle. Like I wasn't even in the story anymore. I stood up and walked into the kitchen just to breathe. And that's when I saw it. Her purse was sitting open on the counter. Inside, her phone, now miraculously charged. But right next to it, a folded receipt from a liquor store 2 blocks from Blake's apartment. Timestamped 3:14 a.m. She said she slept on his couch. So why was she buying alcohol after the party? I didn't confront her with it. Not then. I couldn't. I just stood there, staring at the little slip of paper that felt heavier than bricks. My hands started shaking. Because suddenly, I saw it all. The shot glasses, the mystery cologne, the way she smiled in that video, the excuse that didn't match the timeline. And it hit me like a freight train. She wasn't just lying about where she was. She was lying about who she was with. And I was the idiot still making her coffee every morning. I didn't sleep again that night. I just kept replaying everything in my head. The receipt, the 3 shot glasses, her mascara-smeared face walking through the door like she'd just been out for groceries. Not out all night, doing God knows what. It wasn't just what she did anymore. It was the way she made me feel crazy for noticing. You know what really sticks with me? That she never once asked how I felt. Not once. No, were you worried? No, did you try to call? Nothing. She acted like her disappearing for over 12 hours was some mildly annoying weather report I was obsessing over. Like I should have just shrugged and moved on. Around 2 a.m., I pulled out the blanket from the hallway closet and slept on the couch. Not because we were fighting. No, we weren't even doing that. Fighting would have required mutual engagement. We were just strangers now, living in the same house, pretending we still shared a life. The next morning, I went through the motions. Made breakfast. Toast for me. Nothing for her. I'd usually leave her a plate. Out of habit, out of love, but that morning I couldn't do it. Something in me had shifted. I couldn't pretend it was all normal anymore. She woke up late, stretched like a cat, walked past me without a word, and went straight to the bathroom. That was our communication. Footsteps and faucet sounds. When she came out, she sat down at the table across from me and stared at her phone. I wasn't going to speak. I wanted to see how long she could sit there acting like nothing had happened. 7 minutes. 7 minutes of silence and scrolling. Then, without looking up, she said, "You going to keep acting weird or?" I stared at her. Acting weird. She finally looked up. Yeah, like sulking. That word, sulking, made my hands tighten around the edge of the table. I wasn't sulking. I was unraveling. I was watching the woman I married transform into someone I didn't recognize, and all I had left was the debris of her stories and the pit in my stomach that kept growing. I tried again. Can we just be honest for 1 minute? About what? She asked, like I was wasting her time. About Blake. About what really happened after Maya's. She tilted her head like she was bored in a waiting room. Nothing happened, Daryl. You bought more alcohol at 3:14 in the morning. She blinked. Once. Slowly. You're going through my things now? You left the receipt in your bag, I said. It was sitting wide open. That doesn't mean anything, she snapped. You said you passed out on the couch, I pressed. But you were out after 3. Buying more. That's not nothing. And then she said it. The sentence that broke the last good piece of me. Do you really want to know? Or do you just want something to be angry about? I just stared at her. She leaned back, crossed her arms, and smirked. You wouldn't believe me if I told you anyway. So tell me, I said quietly. Silence. Then, fine. Blake and I made out. That's it. Okay. Happy now? My mouth went dry. I felt my heartbeat in my ears. She didn't even flinch. Didn't apologize. Didn't cry. She said it like she was telling me she lost a sock in the dryer. Then she turned her attention back to her phone like the conversation was over. I couldn't speak. Not at first. My jaw was locked. My hands were trembling. She had just admitted to kissing another man, in the middle of the night, drunk, after vanishing from my life for over 12 hours, and I was the one expected to just swallow it. I trusted you, I whispered. I asked you not to go. I begged you not to drink that much. And you kissed him anyway? She shrugged. It wasn't a big deal. It just happened. It just happened? I repeated, nearly choking on it. She stood up, rolled her eyes, and walked toward the hallway. You always do this. You always turn everything into some huge betrayal. I stood too, finally losing it. Because it is a betrayal, Meredith. She stopped at the edge of the hallway, still facing away from me. You weren't supposed to be his, even for one night, I said. You were supposed to come home. You were supposed to care. She didn't turn around. She just said, well, maybe I needed to feel something that didn't feel like drowning for once. And then she went into the bedroom and closed the door. I stared at that door for over an hour. The thing about betrayal, it's not always loud. Sometimes it drips in quietly, like water under a floorboard. You don't even realize how damaged everything is until you step on it, and the whole thing caves in. After that day, everything changed. She didn't apologize. Not once. No, I regret it. No, I didn't mean to hurt you. In fact, she acted like I should have thanked her for being honest. That was the word she used. Honest. As if spitting that confession in my face was some kind of emotional labor on her part. Like it was noble. For the next few days, we coexisted like awkward coworkers who once kissed and never talked about it again. We made coffee, shared the same bathroom, pretended our lives hadn't just cracked open. But the tension? It filled the space like smoke. You couldn't see it, but it burned every breath I took. She started going out more, late, errands, long gym sessions, spontaneous girls' nights. Every time I asked where she was headed, I got some version of, you don't get to ask me that anymore. She was punishing me. That much was clear. Punishing me for caring, for noticing, for making her feel guilty, not for what she did, but for the fact that I didn't swallow it quietly. And me? I started unraveling. I'd stare at my phone every time she left. I downloaded one of those location apps and then deleted it 5 minutes later, ashamed. I'd smell the pillows on our bed, trying to figure out if they still smelled like her or if they'd already forgotten us. I was spiraling, but quietly, like a man dying in a locked room. Then came Thursday. I got off work a little early, which was rare. My stomach was tied in 1,000 knots, but I was hopeful, stupidly hopeful, that maybe we could talk. Maybe I could cook something. Sit down. Begin again. When I walked into the house, something felt off immediately. There was music playing, not loud, but loud enough that I heard it through the door. And her voice. Laughing. Playful. It had been weeks since I'd heard her laugh like that, and it wasn't directed at me. I stepped in, careful not to make noise, and that's when I saw it. Blake. Sitting on our living room couch. Shoes off. Socks on. Holding a glass of wine. She was curled up next to him like they'd done it 100 times before. She hadn't heard me yet. She was laughing at something he'd just whispered in her ear. She threw her head back and touched his knee like she belonged there. Like that seat was meant for moments they shared, not memories we built. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen, like a forgotten coat hook, useful once, now just part of the background. Eventually, she turned her head and saw me. Her entire body stiffened. Blake turned too, slowly, and then awkwardly started to stand, as if unsure whether to run or explain himself. Daryl, she said flatly. You're home early. That's it. No panic. No guilt. Just that bored tone like I'd interrupted a movie. Clearly, I said. My voice sounded calm, which surprised me. Too calm. Like the kind of calm people mistake for forgiveness, when really it's just what you feel right before you give up. Blake was just, he stopped by, she started. Save it, I said. Blake muttered something like, I should go, and she nodded, not looking at either of us. He grabbed his things. I opened the door for him. Neither of us made eye contact. When the door shut behind him, she finally stood up, crossed her arms, and said, "You don't get to act shocked. I told you I needed space." Space. I whispered. You invited him here. Into our home. Into our space. She rolled her eyes again. I don't think she even realized how much that one gesture broke me. That eye roll, it was like a dagger dipped in apathy. Nothing happened, she said, and for once, she didn't sound smug. She sounded exhausted. He just came over to talk. You were curled up next to him, I said. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Meredith? I asked. Because from here, it looked like the end. That got to her. I saw something flicker across her face, maybe guilt, maybe fear, maybe just annoyance at being caught. But she didn't deny it. She didn't even offer to fix it. She just turned away and said, I don't know what you want from me anymore. I wanted you to choose me, I whispered. Just once. She didn't reply. She walked into the bedroom, closed the door behind her, and left me standing alone in a house full of things that no longer felt like mine. That night, I sat alone in the driveway for nearly an hour before going back inside. I had driven around for no reason. No destination. Just headlights on pavement, windows down, hands shaking on the steering wheel. My thoughts were a blur of what-ifs and what-nows. I passed the diner where we used to get pancakes at midnight. I passed the small park where we once slow danced to music from a stranger's Bluetooth speaker. Places that once felt magical now felt like crime scenes. Like I was driving through the chalk outlines of what we used to be. When I finally walked into the house, the bedroom door was still closed. I didn't even try to go in. I curled up on the couch with my hoodie pulled over my face and stared at the ceiling. I didn't cry. I didn't sleep. I didn't speak. At some point around 3 a.m., I heard her door open. Footsteps padded softly into the kitchen. The fridge opened, then closed. No words. Just the quiet clinking of a glass. I waited for her to say something. Anything. Nothing. She walked back into the bedroom and shut the door again. And I stayed there, on the couch, watching the clock tick in circles. I felt like a ghost in my own life, stuck in the in-between. Not alive, not gone, just drifting. Hoping someone would finally look at me and see what was left. The next morning, something in me snapped. Not with anger. Not with rage. But with clarity. I made coffee. 2 mugs. One for me. One for her. I placed them both on the table, like I used to. She walked out, still in a robe, scrolling her phone. Her eyes landed on the second cup. She looked surprised. Thanks, she said, cautiously, like she didn't trust the gesture. I sat across from her and stared. We need to talk. She didn't respond. Just sipped. The silence between us wasn't tension anymore. It was vacancy. Are you in love with him? I asked directly. She didn't answer right away. And that silence told me more than anything she could have said. Meredith, I said, I need the truth. She looked up at me, eyes tired, and simply said, I don't know. Those 3 words shattered what little I had left. Not know. Not of course not. Just, I don't know. How long has it been going on? I asked. She blinked slowly. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. She nodded. Slowly. Barely. I felt my throat tighten. My hand trembled around the coffee mug, so I set it down before it slipped. Why didn't you just tell me? She looked down. Because I didn't want to be the villain. I let out a hollow laugh. You didn't want to be the villain, so you cheated? You vanished. You lied. You let me sit up nights waiting for you. You brought him into our house, and you still didn't want to wear the label. It wasn't like that, she muttered. Then what was it like? I asked, sharper now. Was it gentle? Was it fun? Did he make you feel younger, more alive, less burdened by the man who thought your safety mattered more than your freedom? She stared at me, jaw tight, then whispered, he listened to me. That hurt more than everything else combined. He listened to me. As if my years of supporting her, celebrating her, staying up through her panic attacks, helping her through job interviews, family funerals, her surgery, none of that counted. Because he listened. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak. I walked to the hallway, not sure where I was going. Then I stopped and turned back. Tell me the truth, I said, voice shaking. Was the party just an accident? Or the beginning? She didn't look away this time. Her voice was quiet. It started before the party. I felt like I'd been punched in the chest. I ended it before that night, she added, quickly. But I don't know. That night. I guess I let it slip. Let it slip, I repeated, like it was a button on a shirt. She closed her eyes. I'm sorry. No, you're not, I said. You're sorry you got caught in a timeline. That's different. I left the house that afternoon. No suitcase. No plan. I just drove until I saw a cheap motel and paid for 3 nights up front. The clerk didn't even look at me. I appreciated that. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to exist. When I got to the room, I collapsed on the bed and stared at the ceiling until night fell. My phone buzzed once. A message from her. Let me know if you're okay. I didn't respond. She wanted to know if I was okay. But what does okay even mean when everything that once felt like home now feels like evidence? The motel walls were yellowed with time, and the air smelled like old cigarettes and someone else's regret. I didn't turn the TV on. I didn't even bother with the light after the sun dipped behind the trees. I just laid there in the dark, phone on my chest, heart refusing to settle. I kept seeing her face, the calm way she said, it started before the party, like she was reading a grocery list. There was no remorse, no panic, no sense that she'd just demolished everything we had spent nearly 7 years building. Just flat honesty, the kind that doesn't come from courage, but from already deciding you're done. She didn't call. Just that one message. Let me know if you're okay. What did that even mean? Was she asking if I'd survived the blow she just delivered? Or was she checking if I'd finally stopped caring? I almost wanted to reply with something cruel, something sharp. But instead, I turned my phone face down and stared at the shadows crawling across the ceiling like slow-moving cracks. I didn't sleep. Again. And by morning, something in me started to change. Not dramatically. Not with some sudden explosion of strength. But with a quiet kind of resolution. Like my mind finally started taking small, desperate steps out of the fire, barefoot and bleeding, but forward. Around 8 a.m., I drove back to the house, not because I wanted to see her, but because I needed answers. Not emotional ones. Not about feelings. I needed facts. The timeline. The details. What was real, and what was the fantasy I had stupidly clung to? When I walked through the door, the house felt staged. There were flowers on the table. Hydrangeas. My favorite. She never bought them. Her makeup bag was zipped shut. The dishes were done. The living room was clean. Everything too clean. Like she had been trying to erase any trace of the night before, or maybe the weeks before that. Like she thought this was a mess that could be bleached away. She looked up from the couch when she saw me. Eyes wide, cautious. She didn't smile. Hey, she said. Just that. I nodded, walked past her, and sat at the kitchen table. She followed after a few seconds, barefoot, her hair pulled back like she was preparing for a war she didn't want to fight. I didn't waste time. How long exactly? She hesitated, then sat down opposite me. 2 months, she said. The number hit me like cold water. 2 months. That was back when we were still laughing in the mornings. When we were planning a fall getaway. When she held my hand during that wedding and whispered she couldn't wait to dance at ours again, just to feel like newlyweds. 2 months. All of that, wrapped in a lie. Did you sleep with him? I asked. She blinked, slow. Once. A single word, but it hit with the weight of a sentence that would never end. When? She didn't answer. When? I repeated, firmer this time. She sighed, looked away. The night of the party. I went cold. The room blurred. For a moment, I couldn't even hear the hum of the refrigerator anymore. Just a roaring silence that filled every inch of me. You looked me in the eye the next morning, I said slowly. You stood in this kitchen, and you said nothing happened. You said it wasn't a big deal. She looked down at her hands. I was scared. No, I said, voice shaking. You were convenient. You used me. You used my silence. You counted on the fact that I'd sit quietly while you rewrote the narrative. I didn't plan for any of this, she whispered. But you let it happen, I said. And then you kept letting it happen. You let me suffer so you could feel better about you. Her eyes welled up, but I didn't care. Not anymore. I had cried enough for both of us. She reached across the table like she wanted to touch my hand, but I pulled away. Slowly. Intentionally. And I saw it, the flicker of panic in her eyes. Not because she regretted what she did, but because for the first time, she realized she couldn't control how I'd react to it. What now? She asked quietly. I stood up. My legs were steady this time. I don't know, I said. But you don't get to ask that question like you're part of the answer. She didn't follow me when I walked upstairs. I could feel her sitting there, probably hoping I'd break again, that I'd collapse into some sad version of the man she remembered, the one who made excuses for her, who took emotional punches and called it compromise. But I didn't collapse. Not this time. I stood in the bedroom doorway, looking at our bed like it was something sacred that had been defiled while I was asleep. And I started packing. I didn't pack like someone running away. I packed like someone being extracted, methodically, quietly, as if each shirt folded was a splinter pulled from under my skin. I didn't even cry. That scared me. It wasn't numbness. It was clarity. The kind of clarity you get after a storm clears and you realize your house is gone, but you're alive. I only took what was mine. Not ours. Mine. My clothes. My books. My old camera she always teased me about never using. I left the framed photos of us on the beach, of us dancing in the kitchen, of her wearing my hoodie. I couldn't take them, and I couldn't throw them away either. They felt like strangers frozen in glass. She stayed downstairs the whole time. I could feel her beneath the floorboards like a presence, pacing, maybe debating whether to come up. But she didn't. Maybe she already knew what was happening. Maybe that silence between us was the final admission that this thing we called marriage had quietly expired, and we were just avoiding the smell. When I zipped the last bag, I paused at the bedroom doorway. I looked at everything one final time. The place where we once whispered about stupid dreams, where she kissed my forehead when I got laid off, where I told her I wanted kids, where we promised we'd never let it get boring. And it had gotten so much worse than boring. I walked down the stairs, bags in hand. She was sitting on the bottom step, hunched over like she'd shrunk 2 inches since morning. Her eyes found mine, and for the first time since this all began, she looked scared. Not guilty, not cold, but scared. "Where are you going?" she asked. I didn't lie. "To figure out what my life looks like without you." She stood up too quickly, like her body was betraying her intentions. "Can we please just talk?" "We've talked, Meredith. You just weren't listening." "That's not fair." "No," I said, voice shaking. "What's not fair is me sitting here night after night wondering why I wasn't enough while you snuck around and tested chemistry with a guy who doesn't even know how to load a dishwasher." "That's not what it was." "Then what was it?" I asked louder now. "Because you said it was over before the party, then you kissed him, then you slept with him, then he showed up in our home. What part of that do you still think sounds like a slip-up instead of a choice?" She opened her mouth, but said nothing. "Exactly." I stepped past her. She grabbed my arm. Gently, like touching a wounded animal. "Please don't leave like this." I turned to her and said the one thing that had been on my tongue since the night I saw her in that Instagram video. "You already left me. You just forgot to pack." That broke her. I saw it in her face, a full-body collapse happening behind the eyes. She looked like she wanted to fall into me and cry, to undo it all, to rewind, to pretend she hadn't burned the bridge we built with years of devotion and small sacrifices. But that moment didn't belong to her anymore. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. I didn't go back to the motel. I drove to my brother's house 2 towns over. He and I hadn't spoken much lately. He had a new baby, and I'd buried myself in trying to keep my marriage from collapsing. But he opened the door and hugged me without asking a single question. Just said, "You can stay as long as you need." I hadn't cried in front of another person in years. But that night, sitting in his guest room surrounded by walls painted for a nursery that hadn't been finished yet, I finally broke. I cried in a way that was almost embarrassing, like I was mourning a death only I had witnessed. Because that's what it was, really. A private death. Of trust. Of belonging. Of all the small moments I thought meant something. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. 12 missed messages from her. 1 voicemail. I didn't listen to it. But the last text read, "I'm sorry. Please come home. I'll do anything." And all I could think was, she means it now. But only because I'm gone. I didn't reply to her message that day. Not because I was angry. Not even because I wanted to punish her. I didn't reply because I finally understood something I'd refused to accept for months, that her regret wasn't about me. It wasn't about our marriage, or the vows, or the years we spent curled into each other on cold nights. Her regret was about her. Her consequences. Her loneliness. Her guilt. And that wasn't enough anymore. I needed more than someone who was sorry after the fallout. I needed someone who chose me before the disaster ever had a chance to strike. That realization didn't come with fireworks. It came in the softest way, my brother's daughter, barely 8 months old, reaching up and holding my finger while I fed her. That tiny hand, that little act of trust, it unraveled something heavy inside me. I stayed in that house for another 2 weeks. Meredith kept texting, kept calling. I didn't block her. I didn't delete her. But I didn't respond either. I gave myself time to breathe. Time to remember who I was before I spent so much energy trying to hold together something that had already been hollowed out. One day, I sat by the lake where we used to fish as kids. Just me and the quiet. I thought about forgiveness. Not the kind that means letting someone back in to hurt you again, but the kind that lets you leave the pain behind without dragging it into every tomorrow. I thought about Meredith, about how once upon a time, we were happy. Truly happy. That mattered, too. It wasn't all fake. The good things were real, even if the ending was poisoned. So I sent her a message. Simple. I'm not coming back. But I do forgive you. Please take care of yourself. She didn't reply. Not right away. And that was okay. A few days later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a short letter, written in the handwriting I knew better than my own. You were always better than I deserved. I hope you find the kind of peace I was too broken to give you. Thank you for loving me when I didn't know how to love you back. No signature, but it didn't need one. And that was the last I heard from her. It's been 7 months now. I moved to a new city, small place, slower pace. I'm renting a second-story apartment above a bookstore. I volunteer at the local library on weekends. I go on long walks. I read again. I breathe again. And just last week, something unexpected happened. I met someone. Her name is Camille. She's not flashy or dramatic or mysterious. She's calm, thoughtful. She listens like she's actually interested. We met in the coffee aisle at a grocery store when I accidentally knocked over her bag of beans. It was nothing, a dumb, awkward moment. But she laughed, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel broken when someone looked at me. We've had 2 coffee dates. No expectations. Just 2 people sitting across from each other, building something new, something honest. And I don't know what it will turn into. But for the first time in what feels like years, I'm not afraid of the future anymore. I'm not defined by who left. I'm defined by the fact that I stayed true, that I got up, that I walked away, not in bitterness, but in clarity. And somehow, in that walking, I found the part of myself I thought she'd taken with her. Turns out, she never had it. It was always mine.